We must demand that government prioritises water security before we face a national crisis. That's the call from Amnesty International South Africa. It says the right to safe, sufficient and reliable water will continue to be threatened until government prioritises investment in infrastructure, implements climate-friendly policies and tackles corruption and the mismanagement of public funds. Let's unpack this further now with Amnesty International SA's activism coordinator, Alicia Jooste, who joins us now virtually from here in Johannesburg. Alicia, thanks for your time this evening. Two very current case studies that could be used in this call being made by Amnesty International, one being the floods in KZN and the other being the ongoing journey towards day zero and in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. Stories that we are watching as we speak, and we watched it unfold as the terrible floods hit KZN as well. What did you learn from digging into some of the mitigating factors in both of those cases, and what could have helped if there was more input from government and the services that are supposed to be rendered?
Hi, and good evening to you and your viewers. So what we learned is, and what we are seeing is that the current or seeing the mismanagement of South Africa's water sources and sector, aggravated by climate change, is making us susceptible to a water crisis. And this means that it's predicted that the country will face its biggest water crisis in the next decade if urgent action isn't taken. When we look at KZN, the KZN floods, the severity of it caused damage to vital water infrastructure, meaning that to date, water delivery is still lacking in many areas, and there is currently water shedding. And in Nelson Mandela Bay, the prolonged drought has been fast-tracked, or day zero has been fast-tracked by the lack of maintenance by the municipality to fix water leaks. So what we're finding is that both extreme weather events are an example of how the lack of accountability and proactive climate-related action from the government is aggravating the impact of climate change and threatening access to water for millions of people across South Africa.
And mismanagement and just a lack of action at municipal level specifically would be something that really would have reared its head quite seriously in the water departments as well, because that is where the hard work of fixing pipes and fixing leaks has to happen on an ongoing daily basis. Are we seeing any improvement in that regard? Because that was an issue in the major metros across the country for years already.
Exactly. So if we look again at the Nelson Mandela Bay drought and the leaks and the lack of maintenance was there, it did take the Department of Water and Sanitation to step in. They did step in a little too late, but what we're finding is that there's a very reactive approach to the maintenance of water, to ensure that water is delivered to people across the country. And so what we need to start seeing is proactive measures. There needs to be a political will to recognize that these extreme weather events will continue, to recognize that, as you say, that maintenance is an ongoing, it's ongoing. It's not something that is a Band-Aid effect that we can attend to in the face of crisis, but something that is an everyday reality to ensure people have access to water.
Now, Amnesty International South Africa believes that access to sufficient water is a right and not a privilege. Do you believe that there's enough buy-in at government level that this is actually true? We're talking about millions of South Africans that already don't have access to basic water supply services, and yet on any given week, you'll see a story on social media where a local municipality expects an applause because they've managed to put in a tap to service hundreds of people in one community that have been begging for water for years. Do you think there's enough buy-in at government level?
There definitely needs to be more. And I think, it's a shame that as civil society, as individuals, that we need to remind governments that access to water is a human right and not a privilege. It's in the Constitution. It's their obligation and their duty to ensure that they safeguard this right. And, we need to continue putting pressure on them until that is recognized at all levels of government and until we start to see greater action to safeguard this right.
Now, you quote the 2018 National Water and Sanitation Master Plan in the statement that you sent out, and pointing there to the fact that we're facing a water supply deficit of approximately 17% by 2030. Now, obviously, all the stats will be there in terms of what we're facing, but does that plan contain what can be done to ensure that we can avoid some of that devastation? We spoke about maintenance. Have we invested in enough dams to provide water to the entire South African population? Because, of course, we're dealing with an infrastructure that was built by an apartheid government that was only interested in providing water to a small part of the population. Has there been enough investment in ensuring that that infrastructure is big enough to really provide basic water services to all that call South Africa home?
It's a really good point. And I think what we find in many of these documents and policies, the plans are laid out. It's when it comes to implementation, that's where we're lagging. And so what we're seeing as well is that where there are resources set aside, we're seeing that there is corruption and the mismanagement of public funds, which means that those resources that are put in place to ensure that every community has access to water is no longer there because of corruption and mismanagement. And so that's a core need, that there needs to be greater accountability measures put in place for anyone found to be doing this, so that we can be proactive in building new infrastructure, for maintaining infrastructure, because right now that political will, that mismanagement and corruption is really hindering the implementation of these policies.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. That's Alicia Jooste from Amnesty International South Africa. She is their activism coordinator, and she's speaking to us there from here in Johannesburg. We thank her for her time this evening.